Hello, this is the second video about the homework assignment 7. It's the second assignment using JavaScript, and we're learning about functions. So while you are going to use this JS fiddle, and you are going to do your work in the JavaScript pane of this fiddle and run and test and so forth, I'm going to show you the code that's in the JavaScript pane, and I'm going to walk you through what the existing code does, the code that I provided for you, but I'm going to show it to you in the Atom text editor so that it's color-coded and easier to look at. So first, it's exactly the same code that you're receiving. I have not done anything extra to it, okay? I just opened it in a text editor. And it's got 79 lines, not counting the last line, which is blank. So what I want to do is I want to go through this code section by section. Now, in the first video, we have already discussed the variables to some extent. And I just want to point out that I have defined, I think, all the variables you will need. I do not think you will need to create any new variables. I already solved this problem. I did not create any new ones. Okay, so you are going to see these 6 words used as variables, used as names of variables throughout the code. So get familiar with them. The first one is height, and it is set at 6,000. It means the height of the mountain. So that number will never ever change. It will not change because the height of the mountain won't change. Okay? Position refers to where is the climber on the journey up the mountain. Okay? How much ground has the climber covered? What is the distance from the starting point? So if the climber has climbed to 500 feet, this number will not be 0 anymore. It'll be 500. But up here, where it's initialized, this never changes. So right here, this number will never ever change in your code. Okay? Next, health. It starts at 100. It is initialized at 100. That means the maximum health when the climber starts is 100. And in fact, I think the health should never ever go above 100 because that would be weird. Like you can't get more healthy than 100%. Food. The climber starts with 50. You will not be able to add more food. There's no way for the climber to pick up any food, so this will never be higher than 50. However, when the climber is eating food, this number, this variable will be used to decrease the amount of food available. However, this number here in the code will never change. This is where the initial value is set, and that initial value is 50. The goat variable is not used in the code as you get it, when you receive it. I put this there in case you think of a way to use it. If you want to use this variable to perhaps count goats, or perhaps count how many times does the climber get attacked by a goat, you could use this and you could add to it. You could also subtract from it if you wanted to. And finally, the distance is initialized as the same as the height. Okay, so we already had height, remember? Okay, so the mountain's 6,000 feet high. What does it mean to initialize the distance as the same as the height, equal to the height? It means that the distance our climber must climb is the entire height of the mountain. So our climber starts at 0, remember, position 0. And the goal is to get up to the top, but initially the distance traveled so far is none of it has been covered. So 6,000 is sitting there waiting to be hiked or climbed by our player. The next set of things we don't have to go over in too much depth. It is the messages. All right, so rather than have all kinds of different text messages scattered throughout the code and, just being messy, right? It's a kind of convention. It's a way a lot of people write code to put all messages that are written into some text area of the page in one place, and to use a really, really short variable name and kind of a systematic method of giving them variable names. So I have a message with the name, the variable is M1. I have another message with M2 and so forth. The numbers don't mean anything. The M doesn't mean anything, but it means that I can always look up my messages here. And if I wanted to add a new one, I would probably do it this way. I'd do M8 because I don't have that yet, and I would write something new. And so now I would have a new message, and by calling the variable M8, I could use that somewhere in my program. I'm going to get rid of that because that's not part of your code. All right, next, one of those messages is initialized as the value of another variable. We haven't seen this variable before. This variable has the name message. And what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, the current value of message right now is the same as M1. And I know this can be tricky for beginners who haven't thought about variables a lot yet, okay? Variables work like this. If M1 has a value of you're at the base of the mountain, so on and so on and so on, then that value will be placed into message as a result of this line. So later in the code, you're going to see message equals something else, possibly M6 or M7, right? So whenever we change the value of this variable, that value will be used, but message is not going to print out M1, M2. It's going to print out the value of that variable. Okay, so get your head around this. Later in the code, when you see message being used, what message contains, it's different throughout the entire program. It's different because we keep feeding a different value into it. Line 23. Now, up until now, you might have been fine. It's like variables, okay, variables, we're showing what's inside a variable. And now, what is this? Where did it come from? What is it? This is a line 23, calls a function. That means it causes a function to execute, to be executed, to run. This function, which is named writeResults, will run as soon as this program hits line 23. Now, in some other programming languages, this wouldn't work. You would have had to show the function first before you call it. JavaScript is very flexible, and we actually have this function lower down in our script, which I will show you now. All right, so remember we're at line 23. We are calling a function. Where is that function? Not there, not there. Here it is. So the very last thing in the file, at the bottom of the file, is a function. Its name, the name of this function is writeResults. So one thing about functions that you need to be very, very clear about is that when you write a function for the first time, you're going to use one pattern, right? Because this is where the function is spelled out. This is where the whole function resides. But when you call the function, which is necessary for it to run, you don't write the word function. You don't use the curly braces. You write a different pattern to call the function, and a different pattern when you're writing the complete function and spelling everything out. And what does this function do? This function does essentially the same activity 5 times, but it does it in 5 different places in our HTML. Okay, so what this is basically doing, and this is covered in Robbins in chapter 20. Sorry about that, chapter 20. This part of the script looks in our document, that is the document to which this JavaScript file is attached, and it says, find an element that has the ID. What ID? This ID, position, and inside that element, in the HTML that is between the tags where you find this ID, between the tags where you find this ID, that means inner HTML, between the tags in the HTML, make that equal to the value of this variable, the variable named position. And I know you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Why does this position have quotes around it and this position doesn't? To explain that, let's look at the last line, the last instruction in this particular function. And there, the ID we're looking for is narration, and the variable that we're going to use to plug in is the variable message, which we were just looking at a moment ago, right? We were looking at how message takes on the value of M1 or M2. So when JavaScript executes this instruction, this last one where it says document get element by ID, narration, inner HTML, message, we're going to walk through what that does. So first, the script finds the ID in your HTML. So it finds this paragraph that has an ID. It's the only thing on the page that has that. And what next? Because it's going to write to the inner HTML, it goes between the tags. In other words, it goes inside that element. That element has a tag on both sides, an opening tag and a closing tag. You know about that, right, from HTML. So the inner HTML means what is between the tags. When this script starts out, when this page starts out, there's actually nothing there at all. Then that line in the script says, put the message in there. But not the word message, right? We are talking about a variable. The variable message contains some value. In this program, in this script, it has received that value from M1 or M2 or M3 or one of those M's, and that value is a bunch of text. It's a string. It's between quotes, right? So that message is going to go inside. And whatever message holds is going to go inside. When we open up this JS Fiddle, we have one message that's already been written for us. This message came from M1, and as soon as we choose climb and we click go, that inner HTML for the paragraph that has the ID, narration, it changes the contents of that paragraph, of that p tag, change. JavaScript dynamically writes a new string into that paragraph because you clicked the button. That's what inner HTML is doing. Okay, now the good news is you are not going to touch this function. This function called writeResults, it's all done. It runs like a little engine and you don't have to open it up because you're not a mechanic yet. You leave it alone. So we'll go back up to line 23. That's where we left, where that function is called. So the function runs as soon as this script comes to line 23, goes down there, gets the function, runs it, writes whatever the values are right now, and then the next thing that this script does is it will execute line 27. That's the next thing that does anything. We're going to go to a new video so you can take a pause, and I will explain the rest of the script in that last video.